Hi, my name is Danielle Harvey, and I am a real estate agent here in Colorado. I am based out of Boulder, Colorado, and I work with Coldwell Banker Realty. And today we are going to go through the exclusive right to list contract. So, if you are perhaps a client just kind of wondering exactly what this contract means, I'm going to go through the outline and the basics of this contract, as well as like the intention behind signing a contract such as this. And then if you are a new real estate agent in Colorado, I hope you find this helpful. When you are first starting, it's really difficult to kind of understand what all these contracts entail and how to fill them out. I am not going to tell you exactly how you fill it out because it will really pertain to how your broker wants you to fill it out, as well as maybe your personal style or your personal negotiation skills. So I'm going to talk through what is typically found in certain sections, but that's pretty much going to be the extent of it. So I am going to get rid of my self here right out of the middle, and we are going to walk through this. So first things first is that your agent will fill this out as either a seller agency or a transaction broker. And your agent should have described these relationships when you guys first met and before you guys started talking about working together. So a seller agency means you really truly have that person as your agent. So your real estate agent is working in an agency relationship with you. They are going to give you their opinion and things like that. If they decide to work as a transaction broker, that really means that they're sort of playing like referee and helping you with the paperwork throughout the process. That comes up a lot if say a buyer comes into an open house. Usually a seller agency will transition over to transaction broker if that buyer is unrepresented by another agent and you want to have your agent kind of like double end the deal. That means that they're going to have to like play referee. So that's a little bit of a background. They're not really going to be able to represent you as an agent. So just make sure you really understand those relationships. So this will be dated, and it essentially is putting into writing that you and your agent are going to be working together for a predetermined amount of time. And you'll see that in a section later on. So Section 2 defines whether or not the person works for a multiple person firm or a one person firm. So in order to kind of go out, branch out on your own and get out of a kind of big office, some people will go and be their own broker. And they have to have done the job for 2 years and be in good standing in order to do so. But multiple person firm is probably what you're going to see most often if like somebody works for an agency just like mine, like Coldwell Banker. So we have here, we are going to define the term. So we're going to essentially state who is the seller, who is the brokerage firm, who is the broker, so the agent, and then we're going to insert here the legal address of the home that is going to be listed for sale. And that is found within public record on the MLS. And so your agent will find that ahead of time, AKA, and then this is what your mailing address is. So two different addresses are placed in there and they match. So check those over when you are looking at one of these contracts. So if affordable housing is checked, that means that it is a part of an affordable housing program. You would know this if you are engaged in an affordable housing program. There's going to be like a cap on how much you can make on that sale and like what it could be listed for. So this next section 3.6 is a sale or a lease. So a sale is the transfer of the property, like meaning you're actually transferring ownership. The lease, of course, is that you are leasing the property. And so that just defines exactly what your agent is going to be helping you with during that time. 3.7 is the listing period. So there will be a predetermined amount of time, and usually your agent will talk to you about that before filling out this form. But this states that your contract begins on such and such date, and then you are under contract to work exclusively with them until whatever date is in here. So keep that in mind, that by signing this, you are agreeing to work with them for 4 months, 6 months, 8 months. There are ways to get out of the contract if you feel like your agent is not working for you or meeting like your standards or things like that. So we'll talk about that a little bit later, but just really look at this and make sure you understand that you are not going to be able to engage another realtor if something goes south until you cancel it if it's before the second date. So 3.8 is that there are certain places that abbreviations will be put into the contract. And then 3.9 defines the computation of days. And so later on, when like a contract to buy and sell is created, that there will be a definition of what constitutes as the day. So for example, does the day per the contract end at 8 p.m. or 11:59 p.m. And so just understanding that as well. And then there's another section in there too of like if for whatever reason a deadline lands on a holiday, it would then, or a weekend, it would go to the next business day. So section 4 defines into writing the brokerage relationship. So if the seller agency box is checked at the very top where we started, that means that the broker represents the seller and is only an agent for the seller. They must treat everybody else outside of that, as it pertains to the property, differently. And then it defines sort of what occurs when something happens within in a certain company. So like, for example, if a buyer comes along from, it's listed by Coldwell Banker, and like a buyer comes along from another agent that also works with Coldwell Banker, how that goes on. Transaction broker is defined in 4.3.2. It states that if the broker works with a seller as a transaction broker, which means that they just are essentially not able to advocate or become an agent for either party within the transaction. So really understand that. Number 5 defines your brokerage duties. So for example, performing the terms of any written or oral agreement. So a lot of times, like if you come up with something that might be like outside of the box, it's really important that you as an agent or you as the client put that into writing, like in an email or something like that. Or make sure it is in the contract. So say, for example, are you going to pay for staging, photography, all that kind of thing? Put it in the contract. Make sure it's there so that we are all understanding how that works, and that there's no concern about it later on. You're going to have to, the seller, it defines what the broker is allowed to also disclose to the potential buyers. So like, for example, like motivating factors, like why is the seller selling? That's a typical question that will come up. Or are they willing to accept less than what you're asking? And what does that look like? That all really needs to be defined ahead of time, and make sure that you all you know exactly what your agent is telling other people. So these are the definitions that if for whatever reason your agent is not performing those duties, these are the rights basically that you have to cancel that contract. Section 6 starts that there are additional duties of the seller's agent. So that basically defines that you're promoting the interest of the seller with the most good faith, loyalty, and fidelity. And you're seeking a price and terms that are set forth within the seller's contract, etc. You're counseling them, that kind of thing. And that is only if you are an agent and not the definition of if you're engaging with a transaction broker. Then going on down to number 7, the compensation piece. This is where the commission will be spelled out. The sale commission is going to be this percentage of the gross purchase price, or maybe a predetermined amount of money. Say no matter what it sells for, they put in a predetermined set amount, and it's not based on a percentage. Just keep in mind here that if they do put in something like 6%, 5.85, whatever that is, they're also using that money that'll go through their broker to pay the buyer's broker on the other side. So it's not that they are obtaining that amount of money. The lease commission is also spelled out here too. And then other compensation would be something that is maybe a little bit out of the ordinary there. So 7.2 states that the commission is earned upon the occurrence of the following. So property sells, the broker finds a buyer who's ready, willing, and able to sell. And then it also was going to put in here that if your agent is engaging with a buyer that's very interested in the property, and then your agreement expires, and then that buyer comes back to you or your new agent or whoever and wants to buy the home, your agent has a quote-unquote holdover period that they would still be able to collect on that commission. So just keep that in mind. That becomes important for if you were to switch agents at any time, that there might be a holdover period and a commission dispute. So going on down to number 8, it just states that your broker's not going to get compensated from any other person. Excuse me. Any other person within the to pay for any compensation unless it's spelled out in writing. If the broker hires somebody to do some sort of marketing, such as put it into the MLS, go onto the property to like do the lockbox, etc., then they must be also that might happen, and typically they need to be licensed. So number 9.1, this is all having to do with how your property is put into the MLS. The property will be submitted into the will or will not be submitted into the MLS, and will or will not have information on there. So this is where you would define exactly what information goes into the MLS and what doesn't. So a lot of times, like, things, you might have a reason why you don't want your information to be placed into the MLS, or you want limited information to be placed into the MLS. This also indicates that you're authorizing your agent to put it on other different online formats, so like Google searches or blogs or their personal website or things like that, social media. You can have and then this 9.1.4 is, your address being displayed. 9.2.1 is the electronic lockbox. Is there a manual lockbox? What's the code? And then 9.2.2 indicates who has the access, like who is your agent able to give that information to. So other agents that are showing the home for their buyers, appraisers that are going to come in during the period, inspectors, and that kind of thing. So that defines that right there, who he or she is allowed to give that information to. And then 9.3.1 is going to be specific to the broker who you're hiring. So any other marketing tasks. That means, like, I'm going to place this into magazines, or I'm going to place this online, or I'm going to do photography. This is where they're going to define what exactly their marketing entails and what they are agreeing to do for that compensation, for that commission. So seller authorizes, this is where you can say, if I don't want like the specific room to be photographed or videoed, then you define that right there. And you just have that information, have that, tell your agent about, like, you don't want this area of the property posted or for whatever reason. Number 9.4, termination of the marketing. So the broker may discontinue using any marketing materials if the broker firm's sole discretion. So, for example, credible threat, complaint, that kind of thing. If your home were to become expired in the MLS, the broker is going to make all reasonable efforts to remove all that information. So they're going to remove pictures, that kind of thing, things that pertains specifically to the sale of that property if it didn't work out. Number 10 defines the seller's obligation to broker and the disclosure and consent. So this goes through like what a seller should, a seller's responsibility in like allowing their agent to do their job, essentially. So 10.1 is about negotiations and communication. So the seller is going to agree that all of the negotiations is going to go through their broker. They're not going to try to do negotiations outside or with the buyer's agent by themselves. That the seller agrees that any advertising must be approved by the broker. So if you went out and ordered your own print material, run that through your broker. No existing listing agreement. So this is a really important thing. If you have decided to part ways with somebody or a contract has expired, you are indicating here that you are not in contract with another agent who was hired to, or that you've engaged to sell your property. Number 10.4, materials and consent. So seller represents that all materials, video, photography, that kind of thing, supplied by the broker are owned by the seller, except for that the seller has disclosed in writing, unless the seller has disclosed in writing to the broker. So 10.5 defines the Colorado Foreclosure Protection Act. Section 11 really kind of gets into the nuts and bolts of sort of what is going to go on when your home is listed. So price. So if the price hasn't been determined, it's pretty popular here. And sometimes like the price isn't determined until like a couple days before, just if there's like a pretty volatile market or things are up and down. So price might be to be determined and then you would do an amendment. But sometimes you do know that information right then and there. So that price that you've agreed to list the home at is going to go here. And then what types of financing or whatever you're going to be accepting from a buyer. What is acceptable? So cash and conventional, FHA and VA. Or other, so there's other, creative types of financing. FHA and VA do have some restrictions, so your listing agent is going to want to know that a VA or FHA loan can even be accepted before you agree to that. Right here, 11.3, you would state whether or not you're going to be paying the loan discount points for the buyer if they're doing a loan. Number 11.4 states that if the buyer's closing, so seller must pay the closing cost for an FHA or VA loan. Right here, it just states that you are not, you are or you are not going to pay that, and if so, if you are paying closing costs, then it's this much. So however much you're able to pay. Earnest money. This is where you determine how much you want to ask the buyer for earnest money, which is sort of like an amount that is given to a title company within a few days of executing a contract to buy and sell between a seller and a buyer. And that's usually 1% to 2% of the list price. And so you just want to determine that, ask your broker what their opinion is, what other people in the neighborhood might have asked for in the past, that kind of thing. So number 11.6 states that how you are going to receive your proceeds as a seller. So do you want a cashier's check? Do you want a wire transfer? That kind of thing. 11.7 is FIRPTA. FIRPTA is a special tax that goes on if a foreign person owns a property here in Colorado. And so basically you're saying you are a foreign person that is going to be subject to extra FIRPTA taxes. Number 11.8 is Colorado withholding. So if the seller is not exempt, the Colorado Department of Revenue may require a portion of the seller proceeds to be withheld. Number 12, deposits. So brokerage firm is authorized to accept earnest money deposits received by the broker pursuant to the proposed contract of the property. So this usually doesn't happen. Brokers usually don't want to accept earnest money. That's usually held with a title company. So just keep that in mind. Number 13 defines the inclusions and exclusions. So inclusions might be things like solar panels, washers and dryers, appliances, anything else unique, like maybe a hot tub. And then it also will indicate that if there's an excess of personal property, like furniture being sold, that there will be a separate bill of sale for that kind of thing, because that usually becomes problematic with lenders. Number 13.1.6 is leased items. So are there solar panels that are leased, or are there other things that are leased that you are going to be asking the buyer to execute a lease with that company in order to do the sale. Number 13.3 is the trade fixtures. 13.4 defines the parking space. So maybe perhaps you have a 2-car attached garage, or you have a defined off-street parking, or you have defined parking spot in a condo complex, that kind of thing. You would write that out here. 13.5.1 is that if you have water rights that you are going to that is going to go to the buyer during the sale, they're defined here in legal writing. And then if there's a well, the well permit number is listed there. And then these are crops, so agricultural land that would really come into play there. So titles and encumbrances. So seller representation. Seller represents that the title to the property is solely in the seller's name. So you're really going to want to make sure who is on the title, because you don't want anything to happen at closing. Conveyance, so this is how an actual home is sold. It's conveyed either through a special warranty deed, general warranty deed, quitclaim deed, personal representative's deed. That usually comes up in an estate. So, somebody has passed away. So, just ask your broker to help you understand the differences between the special warranty deed, general warranty deed, or call the title company. That's probably what they'll ask you to do. So tenancy, so say for example, you're selling a rental property. It states that it's tenant occupied, and they have a listing agreement through such and such a date. So if the closing happens before that, you're going to have to that they're going to now be responsible for seeing that lease to its end. Evidence of title, number 15, seller agrees to furnish the buyer at the seller's expense unless it's agreed upon in a different way. A title insurance policy, that kind of thing. Number 16 represents how much the association payments are and whether or not there's a special assessment going on right now, and whether or not you are going to be paying that as the seller, if there's already one that was already agreed upon during an HOA meeting or whatever. Number 17 defines when the buyer will get possession. So a lot of times people will state that at the delivery of the deed. So basically everybody has closed at the title office, signatures have been received, loan has been funded, that kind of thing. That'll get defined here, how and when you're going to allow the broker to have, or the buyer then to have access to the home. Material defects. So you're going to have to fill out a seller's property disclosure, and you're going to have to put in there that you agree that you are going to put in any material effects known, and whether their current status, a roof got hail damage, but it's now fixed, that kind of thing. You must have carbon monoxide alarms. The condition of the property will be conveyed in the condition at the time that the contract is engaged. So prior to closing, the buyer will have a final walkthrough, and the condition must be in that same, the house must be in that same condition. Default, so the right to cancel. So basically those predetermined broker agreements and seller agreements, if those are ever failed to perform on either end, the broker has a ability to cancel the contract, and the seller has the ability to cancel the contract. Forfeiture of payments. So for example, if the buyer forfeits the contract, they have a lot of opportunity to receive their earnest money back, but sometimes they don't. And so this is basically just states how that money will go back. Will it all go back to you will it stay with you as a seller? Will it go part into your broker and part to you, or will it go back in the entirety to the buyer? Cost of services. So unless otherwise agreed upon, the brokerage firm must bear all the expenses. So sometimes your broker will have in here that they want, if you decide to list your home and 2 weeks later pull it off the market, they might state later on in the contract that they want you to, reimburse them for the price of marketing, that kind of thing. So disclosure of settlement costs, the, lenders, title companies at your engagement, you're going to know exactly how much all that costs during that and who's paying for it throughout the process. Maintenance of the property, the broker is basically not liable for the maintenance of the property during the listing period unless it's agreed upon. So maybe that would happen in a vacant home or something. Non-discrimination. clauses, which are pretty straightforward, hopefully nowadays. Recommendation of tax, legal and tax counsel. So your broker, if it's really not within their expertise, they really need to have documentation or questions be directed towards those people. Mediation. So if there's a dispute, there's this defines how mediation will occur. And then additional provisions. This is really where you'll see a lot of things that your broker has decided to put in themselves. So for example, I will pay X amount for staging. I will pay X amount for photography and videography. Or if you cancel the contract and it's not because I can't sell it, you just decide to pull it off the market because you have a change of heart, I want that reimbursed. Like things like that will get defined here. And then any sort of attachments that might go along with the listing agreement, and that really varies. So that just is defined there. This indicates like how communication will occur. So will it occur through like our contract system, DocuSign, CTM contracts, that kind of thing? Will it, be solely in writing, that kind of thing? Everybody will get a copy of the contract, and this is where everybody assigns that they're in agreement to all of those sections. So that is a really quick run through of the basics of the exclusive right to list here in Colorado. I hope you found that helpful. And if you need any further information, my contact information is below. I would be more than happy to help you along in your home selling journey if you don't have somebody already. So